Hey guys, my guest tonight, Nomar Slevik, is going to tell us about paranormal happenings in the state of Maine. We'll be right back. Grab your popcorn and snacks. Find a comfy spot, take a seat or lie down, and let me transport you to a place of fantasy, ghost stories, ancient legends, odd creatures, alien encounters, and other magical topics. You may even decide to join the conversation. From faraway lands to your own backyard, with a small dash of pixie dust. Turn out the lights and open your minds. The journey is about to begin. Good evening, everybody. How's everybody doing? I hope you said great. Obviously, my AC is back on, and heat has come back with a vengeance. My name is Charlotte. Of course, my name's there, so yeah. I'm going to be your host for the next hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team, based out of, I'm going to say, overly sunny Sacramento, California. We are 45 strong up and down the state, which means if you have a paranormal problem, your home or business, or you think you might have a paranormal issue going on, give us a call. Look us up online. We can help you. It might take us a couple days to get to you because the state here is just huge. Absolutely huge state. But we will get to you. And in the meantime, if it's going to take us a couple days, we do have psychics and mediums on staff who can phone you and talk to you about what may or may not be going on in your neck of the woods. And in most cases, they can calm the energy down before we can get out here, or get out there, rather. So that's a big help. And I'm available by phone 24/7, too. Okay, that being said, you want to find us, check us out on social media. We're still rebuilding our website. Huge website. At one point, it was one of the biggest websites in California. So I'm having to rebuild all that, go to a new carrier and all that good stuff. So it's taking time. However, you can find us on all the social media sites. That being said, if you're watching from Facebook tonight, and a lot of you are, please feel free to hit that like button. Let us know that you like the show. Share us around, toss us around. I have people who even put me in their pockets when they're cleaning house, which is kind of cool. All right, and if you haven't done so already, follow us. Hit that follow button. I'd really appreciate it. Now, over to YouTube, which works almost the same, right as Facebook. I have more than 1,000 videos sitting over there. I am a journalist, photojournalist. I don't like to cover paranormal. Well, it's not okay, I don't like to cover, but I like to change it up. So I'm not covering paranormal all the time, but I do change it up. As you can tell by some of the stuff with the opioid crisis and murders and, the different crime stuff and all that. I like to change it up. But like I said, there's more than 1,000 videos at YouTube. I'm trying to put them into categories to make it easier for people because that's starting September 3rd. We'll be on our 5th year doing the show. This in this format. So that's going to be like 4 years worth of videos. It's a lot of video. And even when I go in there to look up somebody or look up a show, I get a migraine. So I have to categorize them. You like psychic stuff? Medium Nancy Matz has her own folder. You like cryptids? That's got its folder. UAPs, that has its folder. So everything has its own folder to make it easier to find. Okay, same rules apply. If you haven't done so already, feel free to subscribe over on YouTube. Also, show us some love today. Give me a thumbs up. Give me a happy face. Let me know how you like the show. That would be great. And you guys need to chat in the chat room, right? Because what that does is that puts us higher on what they call the FYP, which is the For You page. And that's where Facebook and YouTube and Twitch and TikTok and all those other cool places will put you if you get a lot of people involved and sharing stuff and communicating together on your show. And what that is like on Facebook, when you go down and you start to scroll down, you hit a bunch of you hit the reels. And then you come down and there's suggested people and the suggested pages. That's the For You stuff, okay? That's what we're always trying to do. And feel free to share this. You might have somebody in the house, and you start to like this, and you think, hey, come over here, watch this little show. That's all we ask. That's why at the end I always say share it with 5 people, right? Okay, well, now that I'm done and I said my piece, you can see that streamer down at the bottom, and that's for our Patreon page. We are offering some really cool goodies over there to people that sign up, which include early access to shows, the opportunity to, when you see a show listed on YouTube, the opportunity to submit questions that you would like me to ask the guest for you, right? Instead of doing it in the chat room, we can do it that way. Have it all pre-prepared to ask the guest. And we're also starting a new show, which is going to be going, I think, once or twice a month on Saturdays. It's kind of like Campfire Ghost Stories, only we're calling it Ghost Stories in the Dark. And I'm putting a focus on emergency crews, like police and things like that. But I'll also take personal. I'll also take personal stories. But we're going to sit down on Saturday nights in the dark, and we're going to talk about ghost stories. Okay? So that's going to be coming up here very soon. And again, I'm on Xfinity, and so are all my neighbors. And as you know, there's a lot going on in the news cycle right now politically, and so everybody and their brother, when they get home from work, boom, they're on Xfinity. So if you see me blink on and off, like you've been seeing in the last couple minutes, that's why. Okay, I end up going to where, like when you're playing Mario when he falls off the cliff, right? Where does Mario go? That's where I go when that thing blinks off. All right, now getting on to this. Last night we talked about Haunted Tucson. Had a great time talking. Tonight we're going to Maine, and we're going to be talking about paranormal stuff there with Nomar Slevik. I hope I said his name right. I'm horrible with names. But hopefully I said his name right. We're going to be talking about Paranormal Maine. Now, who comes from Maine, which is kind of cool, right? Stephen King. And he's written a lot of books that have been based around stuff, obviously, in Maine, in that general area. So let's talk to Nomar. I'll let you get to know him a little bit, and then we'll get on with this, and let's get spooky. Here we go. Hello, sir.
Hey, Charlotte. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. You can hear me all right?
Yep. Tell me about you.
Sure. I'm a Mainer. I actually lived in the same town as Stephen King for quite some time, so that's always fun. Drive by the house. And I'm also a writer and a storyteller and a researcher, and I find all things strange very fascinating. So that's basically me in a nutshell.
Honestly, I've never heard a lot about Maine being really active, with paranormal activity until I heard you on the other guy's show, talking about that.
Yeah.
So what got you into all of this?
Well, I really feel like a catalyst happened when I was like 4 years old. I had two strange experiences when I was quite young. And the first one was I had fallen asleep in something, I'd gone to bed, my parents had put me to bed, and I had fallen asleep, and something in the middle of the night woke me up. And it was a loud bang or something, I'm not really sure what it was. So my eyes popped open, and I'm looking around for some sort of explanation. I start to hear tapping at the windows, and then I look at the window, and the sky's lighting up, and I'm like, oh, a thunder and lightning storm. So I sit up in bed to watch this lightning storm, and I'm seeing the little, jagged little yellow lines of lightning. You just see them in a split second. But at one point, there was this really disturbing jagged yellow line, and it was stuck in a cloud, and it wasn't going away. Like, even at 4 years old, I knew that lightning lasted, less than a second, but this was stuck. It was like stuck in the sky. It's really weird. And there was like electricity coming off of it, and there was booms associated with it. And then I'm not really sure what happened. I ended up falling back asleep, I guess, because the next thing I remember, I'm waking up in the morning. I go use the bathroom, and coming from the bathroom, walking back to my bedroom, I can see out the window, and it's still there. So I went downstairs, and I knew it was strange, so I went downstairs to get my dad, brought him back upstairs, and it was gone when I went to show him. So I was trying to explain the thunder and lightning, and and he was doing the dad thing, like patting me on the head. He's like, yeah, buddy. And but I must have been really insistent, because he had to get down on my level, put his hands on my shoulders, and like, buddy, it didn't even rain last night. I don't know what you're talking about. And 4 years old, I wasn't thinking anything paranormal. I didn't even know what that was. So, the next thing caught my attention, and I forgot about it. And a couple weeks later, my dad is waking me up in the middle of the night now. And, I don't know what's going on. I'm all groggy, and he brings me downstairs, and I can see my mother shoving my sister into her winter jacket and hat and stuff. And then she does the same thing to me, and then my dad scoops me up, and we all go outside. Well, Maine in the winter and going outside at night, it's very, very cold. So I had my head like buried in his chest, and we're out on the front porch, and we go out to the front lawn, and he keeps saying to me, "Buddy, you got to look up. You got to look up." So I finally take my head out of his chest and I look up, and it's the Northern Lights. It's the only time I've ever seen the aurora borealis, and I remember it like it was yesterday. You know, the ribbons of green and red and stuff. So I think those two events happening so close to each other created some sort of core memory that weird stuff happens in the sky and I should pay attention. And then it wasn't until my like late teens when I was thinking back to the lightning bolt that might have been a UFO, and maybe this is a screen memory or something, or I couldn't recognize what I was looking at. So the closest thing to my mind was a lightning bolt or something. I was 4 years old. I don't know, but my adult mind now still remembers it as a lightning bolt stuck in the sky. It was really weird. But so anyways, long story, I guess a little longer, that I feel like that was my catalyst to like caring about all things really strange.
That's awesome. That's really awesome. And as you got older, did you witness other stuff?
I did, yeah. I've seen quite a few what I would call UFOs, and just because I'm calling it a UFO doesn't mean extraterrestrial. It's quite literally, and something unidentified. But I've seen, more than a handful of strange lights in the sky. Mm-hmm. I think really the next significant one didn't happen until my 20s, and I was living in the southern part of the state. And the way it happened was really interesting. I had gotten home from work, and it was probably 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. And I was upstairs in my computer room, and I was on the computer working on stuff. And I hear that my roommate comes home probably like a half hour later, and it's already dark. Again, it's kind of like fall in Maine, so it's already dark. And I can hear my roommate come home and then clomping up the stairs, and then immediately comes into my room. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? They're like, there's a UFO outside right now. It's hovering over the neighbor's house. Like, you got to come see it. And I'm like, what? And my roommate is like a total skeptic. Mm-hmm. And they said, yeah, it was like following me home. Like, it was running parallel with the road. Wow. So I'm like, oh my God. So I go downstairs. This was like, 07, maybe 04, something like that. And I get outside and I stand on my front porch and I look across the street at my neighbors, and I'm kind of up on a hill and they're like down on the road level. And sure enough, like maybe 300 feet above their house, I can see two red lights and then a white light in the middle, and it's kind of in the shape of like a boomerang or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I can't see an object behind it, but it's just hovering above the house. And so I have a cell phone on me, but it was one of those Nokia brick phones, Right. So I pull it out and take a picture of it, and it's just like this, jagged red dot in blackness. It didn't look like anything. And then it started to move, and it moved up diagonally, maybe like another 100 feet, and then it stopped again. So I'm watching it. I'm like, oh my God, what's it going to do next? And then it starts taking off at like a level trajectory, very slow. And it's kind of paralleling the road again and just following the road. That's what it looks like to me. So I want to follow this thing and see where it goes and see what happens. So I run down to get in my car. And my car is facing the house. So when I get in my car, I immediately lose sight of the UFO because now it's behind me. So I back out, get down to the road, and it's gone. I don't see it anywhere. So I go down the road about a mile in the direction that it was headed, and there was this open field that's there. So I kind of pull off the road, and I'm just sitting there waiting for it, knowing it's going to show up any second, and I keep looking and keep looking. I must have been out there for 45 minutes, an hour, and never saw it again. But it was really interesting, and one of the stranger things I saw as an adult. Yeah.
How much, when you think about a state like Maine, how much paranormal activity do you know of that actually goes on there?
I think a lot happens.
Because you don't hear a lot about it.
Yeah, and maybe that's because of where you are, and we're such a small state, population wise, but it's really, really old over here, and hauntings seem to be plenty. There's a ton of paranormal teams, and there seems to be a haunted house, or a haunted business or a haunted location of some sort, every 5 miles or so. So it's a really old area, but there's also a lot of reported cryptid sightings, and there's tons of UFOs reported as well, so it seems to be a really interesting state for strange happenings, and year round.
You mentioned cryptids. What type of cryptids do people see?
People have seen Bigfoot. That's something that is mostly seen. There are some sea serpent or lake monster stories as well, and dogman too. Some really interesting dogman stories. They're not abundant, not like Bigfoot, and I think there's even more, sea serpent type stories more than dogman. But the few dogman stories that are here, and it seems to be climbing, but there's a handful that are really compelling, and those types of stories still freak me out.
Could you share a couple with us?
Yeah, sure. There's a really interesting story. There's a small town called Palmyra, Maine, and this is in the early aughts, and an older couple had decided to rent this farmhouse, and it provided them with a lot of land. What had happened recently is the husband was hurt pretty severely at work, and it disabled him to the point where he couldn't work. And they needed to, and they wanted to go to an area that was easier for him to move around and have more space. So they found this farmland area and started renting it, and strange stuff happened, like right as they moved in. Like, they were unpacking boxes one night, and through the window, the husband saw these balls of light down in the tree line, and they're kind of bopping around. And in his mind, it was nothing paranormal. He was thinking maybe it was poachers, and if not poachers, maybe it was just people going for a night walk on his land. Either way, he wasn't really comfortable with it, And not that it was his land, he didn't own it, they were renting it, but it made it uncomfortable that they were on the property that they were renting. So in the following week or so, he asked his son and his daughter's boyfriend if they could go down to where he saw the lights and to see if there was any sign of like poachers or somebody having been down there. I don't know if it's a trampled path or maybe there's just a trail there. So they go down and check it out, and there's nothing. So, they move in, and they're kind of getting into a routine again. And one of the things they like to do, him and his wife, was after dinner, they like to make a big pot of coffee and sit out on the front porch during the good weather and look for critters on their property. The wife had a big, high-powered flashlight, and, they look for eye shine or whatever, and shine the light on the property. There was a man-made pond that kind of sat a little bit in front of the house, and then there was a fence that was there too. So they're out there one night, and they're having their coffee, and they're looking at animals, and there's some raccoons, and I think they saw a skunk and whatever. And then by the fence near the pond, they saw some eye shine, and almost looked like something was drinking from the pond, and it might have been a deer. So she turns on the high-powered flashlight, and whatever it's shining on is not a deer. It looks weird. It does have a snout, but it looks weird. And after just a moment, this thing proceeds to stand up, and it appears bipedal. It appears to have, a torso and shoulders and arms and legs, and they're getting a really good look at this thing because of this high-powered flashlight. They're saying it's got short brown hair. They've seen the ears on the side of the head, and it goes to a point. They're seeing the snout. And after a moment, they see a couple of more eye shine on either side of it, down by the water. And then those two things stand up. So now there's 3 bipedal creatures standing on their property, and they look massive. They said they were 7 feet tall, close to 7 feet tall. They said that height because there was a shed near the pond, and their heads were pretty much in line with the top of the roof. So they're very startled. And, this is all happening within a few seconds. And it doesn't seem like they like the light being on them. So they take off running and they go down by the side of the house. So the two of them are freaked out and they go back inside. They go back inside, lock the door. And then the husband decides that it's a good idea to call the cops. So he gets the police on the phone and he explains what's going on. And almost as if they've heard this before, they're like, well, this isn't our deal. Call the game wardens, and basically ended the phone call. So he hangs up the phone and she's like, well, are they coming? And he's like, they told me to call the rangers, the game wardens. So he picks up the phone, finds the number, calls them. And then they also kind of sound like they've heard this before. And they said, we're not coming out to the property, but we recommend to stay inside and lock the doors. And they end the phone call. So they thought that was strange, and basically they're on their own. The wife, she did not like having guns in the house, but the husband did have guns, but he kept them in the shed that was by the pond that was outside, which was near those creatures at one point. And he's really insistent that he wants to go outside to get one of those guns to try and protect his family. And she's trying to beg him not to. And again, he doesn't move the greatest, but he's convinced he needs to go out there and do that. The wife, she wants to go upstairs and check on the daughter. It's an adult daughter, but she's spending the night and she's asleep upstairs. So she goes up and he goes outside. So now he's on the front porch and his back is like to the front door. And he's looking around just to make sure everything's cool. He doesn't see the creatures. But it's very dark and he's concerned, and he didn't bring the flashlight for whatever reason. Not thinking clearly probably. Right. And he starts to make his way slowly down the front porch stairs. As he reaches the last step, this light illuminates everything around him, and he's like, whoa, and it freaks him out. And then he realizes it's the light that's over the shed, and it's a motion light. And so he's like, oh, good, okay. And when the light came on, just on the peripheral of the light over by the fence, he could see the three creatures again. And he's like, oh no. But they were far enough away that he thinks he can make it to the shed to get his gun and keep the light on, so he's kind of waving his arms every once in a while. And while he's having this thought process, the light goes out again. And he's like, oh no. And he can hear a little bit of movement, so he's waving his arms like crazy. The light comes back on, and the creatures are closer. But with the light back on again, they kind of back off. And he's like, I'm not going to be able to move quick enough to keep that light on and get to the shed. So he decides to back up, goes back up the porch, goes back inside, locks the door. The wife comes down. She's like, what the hell happened? He's like, they're out there. I couldn't get to the shed. So she's like, come on, I'll help you upstairs, and we'll go, hide in the bedroom. We'll try to figure out what the hell to do. So they go upstairs and they check on the daughter again, and they look out her bedroom window. And when they look out the window, looking back up at them are the creatures, but there's two more.
Wow.
And then they see a sixth one, and it almost seemed to them like maybe they were having sex or something together, because like one was on the back of the other. But then they realized that it might have been a juvenile, and it was on its mother's back. And it was, like in a piggyback type of thing. And it was also looking up at them. And, they're looking down, the creatures are looking up, and then the creatures scatter. And they're like, oh God. And so during this time, the daughter kind of wakes up, and they're trying to explain to her what's going on. And she was able to see those creatures before they scattered. And she's like, oh my God. It's like, I understand what's happening now. So now there's three of them awake. They don't know what the hell to do. So they kind of sit on the floor near the window in the daughter's bedroom. And they start to hear all this banging and scratching all around the house. And it's almost as if these creatures don't know how to use a door, or don't know that you can smash through a window, or they just want to terrorize them. And they're not doing those things because they just want to scare them. Right. They don't know which one it is, but either way, they're scared. and they're hearing them walk on the roof. It's crazy. And this keeps them up all night, that it gets to be about 3, almost 4 o'clock in the morning, and they finally fall asleep, and they're still kind of slumped on the floor in the daughter's bedroom. And finally the sun comes up, and that wakes them up just a couple hours later. And so they get up and they look outside, and they don't hear anything, they don't see anything. So then they decide to go downstairs and venture outside. And when they go out there, they're seeing all sorts of claw marks on the house and on the door, and they're seeing really big footprints with claws on the front of them, on the dirt. And so that was basically their encounter in a nutshell. And, I went through that really quick, but that was basically their encounter in a nutshell. And it took them about a month, because you can't just move out of a place just like that. There's costs involved, but they were able to get out of there in like a month. And, they didn't want to be there anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's one of the stories.
Like? I know you described it as a bipedal creature, but obviously they probably got the best view looking out the daughter's window, right? To see what and to them, I guess for lack of a better term, and to not have their quotes right in front of me, it basically looked like a Bigfoot with a wolf's head. So very broad-shouldered, massive-looking creatures. They looked to weigh, 500, 600 pounds. They were just so big, The juvenile one definitely looked smaller, but they didn't see that one for too long, and it was, and it was dark out, so it was kind of blending in with the other one that it was on its back, but it seemed smaller than the other. So that's why they thought maybe it was a juvenile of them, but... Interesting stuff. My girlfriend and I ended up going to the area last winter, and it's a working farm now, so it's a business, and we didn't want to obviously go on the property and bother them. But right next door is like this eerie, hand-built church, really small, kind of like you would see in a Stephen King movie, a small town church that was made by the townsfolk, and it has this massive cross like on the front of it. And so we parked in that parking lot, and we were taking, telephoto pictures of, the house and the tree line and where we imagined stuff happened in the movie. In the story. And we did find out that right across the street, literally across the street, is a nature reserve. Pretty interesting. It is interesting.
Yeah.
When you talk about Maine, what we see on TV is lots of trees and wilderness. Is it like that, or is it, a little bit of that, a little bit of this?
It's mostly that. I would say it's 90% that. Even southern Maine, which is the most populated area and the biggest city in Maine, is Portland, and it's kind of like a mini Boston, if you will. I'm probably misrepresenting those people, but even that area, you just go, you can go 5 miles out of town and boom, you're surrounded by trees, Okay. Yeah. Yeah,
because that's how I envisioned it. Because the only contact I've had, obviously, is through Stephen King movies, and whatever other movies happen to be out there.
Sure.
You just do get snow, right? It does snow. It's
cool
because it snows and you're by the ocean. What more can you want?
Yeah, I know, right? By month 3 of snow, you're over it, But yeah, the winters are a little too long. But
as my dad would call it, because he grew up in Cleveland, Ohio.
Oh, yeah.
Cleveland snow. He said, the first 2 or 3, the first week or so, it's beautiful, and then it starts to get dark and icky and slushy and all this, So that's what he called it, was Cleveland snow. What's it like for you, when you go out to look into these cases? What's it like for you to do that? Are people really open with you, talking to you about stuff, or are they still hesitant now? Because I know a lot has come down. It's kind of like with ghost hunting. When I started 18 years ago, nobody wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
But then TV came, and then it was hip to be a ghost hunter. Now everybody has a story. Everybody's out ghost hunting. So, what's it like for you to go out and research these legends and stories?
Yeah, it's kind of similar, but they're more open than they are reserved. but there still is that reservation. And a big goal of mine when I meet and talk with people, and sometimes they don't even want to meet, they just want to, either chat on the phone, or they might want to do a messenger chat of, just text, which is fine. However they want to communicate is fine. But what I try to instill is that, I'm a non-judgmental, kind ear. So you can tell me your story and it's safe with me. Hopefully you'll let me share it in some of the mediums that I work in, because I'm a storyteller and I'm a writer, and, I like to share these stories. And, but, sometimes they don't want me to, and that's fine too, because I'm also a collector of these stories. And, I think it's good to have that documented, even if they don't want it shared publicly. But as far as openness goes, I think when somebody, because you can say you're kind and not judgmental, but once they start to experience it, that's when they really start to open up. And that's when I can get some follow-up questions in and try to paint a bigger picture of what's been going on. Because there's the initial encounter, but what happened the day before, or the week before, or, a few months before, maybe a year before? Are there any little things that you noticed that were just kind of strange and may have been a clue to what this thing actually, this thing manifesting, were there any signs? And then there's the aftercare as well. I'm not there just to pillage a story and then get out of their life. I'm also not there to be their best friend, but I want to let them know that you can continue to contact me if you need to, and I'll do the best I can. I never have concrete answers for people. I mean, nobody does in this stuff. But I think just as long as you're honest about that, I think it goes a long way, and people are understanding that there's no answers. But the best I can do is offer an opinion. Right. But even more importantly, if I can share their story, somebody who cannot come forward or is not ready yet might read their story or hear their story and know that they're not alone. And that's a pretty big deal. It might help somebody who's going through a traumatic experience,
Absolutely. Well, I would think having 3 or 4 things outside your house would be a pretty good traumatic experience. Wow.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's one of the as far as ghosts and things like that go? What case or what story do you have that stands out in your mind?
Geez. Well, we were paranormal investigators for a lot of years, and we had a lot of interesting encounters and caught cool EVPs and a few visual things here and there. But there was this one particular house. It was formerly a funeral home, and it was it's still alive and well in the town of Carmel, Maine. And we were getting reports that people were being bothered inside their apartments. They had turned this funeral home into 4 different apartments, I believe, from what I remember. And a majority of the stuff was happening in the basement. And now the basement was actually the area where the hearse would back down and drop off bodies. And during the winter, there were separate rooms where they would stack bodies, so once they could bury them once the ground thawed. So, on the surface, it's kind of a macabre history, but it is a funeral home. So, I mean, it's not that strange, but it's unusual for civilians, if you will, to be in there, We're not used to being around it like that. And we didn't have access to all of the apartments upstairs. We only had access to one of them. And we did an investigation of that one. Not a whole lot happened there. But once we got to the basement, it got really strange. And in that particular room I'm talking about, where they kept the bodies, we had a K2 meter up on a windowsill there. And we were having a full-blown conversation. It was me and another investigator and the K2. And, you're asking yes or no questions. Right. But it was super responsive. It kept going into the red, which we kept asking, if it's yes, go to the red. If it's a no, I can't remember for go to yellow or for don't light it, something like that, just so we could really easily distinguish. We must have had a half-hour, 45-minute conversation with this thing. And what we gleaned from that was that there were hundreds of spirits or something, their soul, something. And there was a more aggressive leader if you will. You know, not a demon or anything, but it was something that was a little bit more aggressive and oppressive, that was kind of keeping these other spirits from moving on, or they were too afraid to move on. And this thing kind of like running everything. And while we were in that room, we also would see, you know, like shadows walk by in the hallway. It was really, really fascinating. So we ended up investigating there, you know, a handful of times, because typically we would just go to a place like one time, but we kept kind of getting called back there, you know. So over the course of a year, I think we went there like 5 or 6 times or something. And the last time we went, we were asked to, like, if we could, can we cleanse it? Can we get whatever is in there out? You know, we didn't really know how to do that. We would just go there to document, but we did know some people that could come in and like sage the place and bless it, and then do a salt barrier and, you know, and all this stuff. And so they go around, they bless the place as much as they can where we had access. And they also did a salt barrier from what I remember, but they left a portion of it open so we could try to push things out, and they didn't have any other way to go except for this exit that we kind of created. And it's almost like we made this little path with like K2 and other EMF detectors on the ground. We kind of set them 5, 6, 8 feet apart. And during this casting out process, definitely wasn't exorcism, but it was like maybe forcefully asking these things to leave, you know. And you could see the K2s and the EMFs go off as they like walked by. It was fascinating. And at one point I wanted to go outside to see if I could see anything like exiting this area. And at one point I'm standing there, and they would radio to me like, oh yeah, K2's going off, this is going off, something should be coming out at any moment. I didn't see a lot, but at one point I saw these white pair of legs like step out, and it's like they turned toward me, but there was no torso or head or anything. It was just like almost like I was seeing legs or white pants or something. And then it kind of just dissipated, you know, and I radioed the team, and it's like, oh, I just saw a pair of legs. It's crazy, you know. But that was really like impactful. There was lots of just little moments throughout all of those investigations. I remember one time I had told whatever was there, like, you can use my energy. I'm allowing you to use my energy. And some people didn't like that. They were like, don't use mine, use his, you know. And I started to feel like this, I don't know, my body was like buzzing. And one or a couple of the investigators, they were looking at me, and they're like, you almost like have this aura around you right now. And I'm like, I can feel it. This is crazy. And it seemed like they were trying to manifest or do something. And maybe I unintentionally invited something nasty. I don't know. I don't think there was any ramifications from it, but it was pretty fascinating.
When you were talking about lining the meters down the hall, you know, or that area, I did something similar at the Murphy's Hotel a few years ago, because we would go up to the main ballroom where there was a lot of activity, and we would get really good EVPs there. And I got the idea that, okay, let's sit around one of the tables, and I'm going to put these motion detectors like out like 5 feet away from the table, all the way around. That way we could see the ghosts as they were coming in to talk to us. You know, to see the motion.
Really good.
It was really cool. It was really cool because they would light up. Then we would get like stuff on the dowsing rods, you know, and things like that going on. And then the meters on the table would light up, and then they would light up again, and they would get quiet. So we were able to kind of figure out the comings and goings. It's a great technique to use. Great technique.
Yeah. It was really cool. I mean, this was like over a decade ago now. I think it's one of the few times we actually did something like that, but it was really impactful to like, I think something's actually happening here. I think we're getting things out of here. I think, you know, and I do recall after that things definitely quieted down. You know, I don't know if it was 100% cured, if you will, but it was definitely quieted down for quite a while. And then the person that we knew that lived there like eventually moved out, and we didn't really have contact with people there anymore, but it's still standing. It actually sold recently, I think in 2022 maybe it sold, so it's got new owners in there right now. But curious if they're having encounters.
They'd be interesting. Did you find that the more you went back, the more relaxed even the ghosts were with you? Because that's what we found in different
Yeah.
locations where we'll do repeat investigations, and the ghosts are more calm around us, and because they know us.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'd say calm, but it seemed like more would happen
Right. More
comfortably
calm.
around us. Like there was more experiences, some cool EVPs, but we were getting like a lot of in the moment stuff that you couldn't really capture. Which is like shadow people or really strange sounds where there shouldn't be sounds. Yeah, it was interesting.
Tell me about some of the UFO encounters that people have had.
A really interesting one. I love to tell this story because it also involves like two phenomenons.
Okay.
So this happened in the mid 90s, and this woman was married to her husband at the time. They have since divorced, and they had two teenage kids, like 14 and 16, boy and a girl. And it was a little before 9 p.m. and mom and dad were going to go upstairs to bed and like watch a movie in bed. And the kids were excited for some movie that was going to come on, and they were going to watch it downstairs in the living room. So mom's upstairs and she's brushing her teeth, and her husband's in the bedroom kind of, just disrobing, getting ready for bed. And she can hear him say like, wow, that's a weird light out there. And she continues to brush his teeth. He's like, geez, that's so weird. That's not the moon. So, at this point, she like pops her head out in toothbrush in mouth. She's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you got to come see this light. It's really strange. So she gets done brushing her teeth. She goes out the window or, goes to the window and looks out, and she sees the light. She's like, that is weird. And it was this big ball of light really high in the sky, and it looked moon-like, but it definitely wasn't the moon. And they could see the moon on the other side of the horizon. So there were like two moons out there. It was really strange. So he's like, do you want to go outside and check it out? She's like, yeah. So they start coming down the stairs, and the stairs lead right into the living room. And so the kids are like, what the hell are you guys doing? Because they saw them going to the front door, and they're like, oh, there's a weird light outside. You guys want to come see? And they're like, yeah. So all four of them are out on the porch now. And where this light was, it was like on the right side of the porch. So they're all kind of like having to lean over the banister to look at the side of the house, to look up at the sky and see this ball of light. And the moon was over here. So they're all looking at this light. It's pretty high. And just after a moment or so, the light in an instant is now in front of the house, and it's much lower. Like it's just above the trees. It doesn't seem or feel celestial anymore. And they're like, whoa, what the hell happened? So now they're all kind of in the front of the house, and they're staring at it. And again, just another moment or so later, it blinks out. They couldn't have been outside more than a couple minutes. So they're like, well, that was weird. And they all go back inside. When they walk in, the kids are looking at the TV, and they can see the credits of a movie going. And I think they recognize one of the actors in the credits. And they're like, hey, that's the movie we were going to watch. What time is it? And the mother's like, no, that your movie's going to come on. That's the previous movie. It's just getting done. Your movie's going to come on at 9. They're like, no, that's our movie. What time is it? So she goes into the kitchen and looks at the stove, and there's a little clock on the stove, and it's 11 p.m., just before 11 p.m. So the whole family had 2 hours of missing time when they were watching this light, and they all knew that, and they all recognized it, but they didn't really talk about it, and it was weird. And this lady that I met with and I'm interviewing, and she tells me this story, she also told me a bunch of stories before it and a few stories after it, and she seemed to have a lifetime of these encounters, really crazy stuff. And towards the end of the interview, and I must have talked to her for like 3 hours, her eyes are teared up. Such a nice woman. And she says to me, like, why me? And I didn't have an answer for her. And I told her that much too, like I don't know. The only thing I know, and I told her the thing about sharing your story, somebody else might read it and not feel so alone. It feels relatable to them, So it wasn't the answer she wanted, but I think it was comforting to know that her story might help somebody else, So, but that was a really strange one. And I liked, just from a story and experience and encounter collector perspective, I like that it has like two phenomena in it, the UFO, the missing time,
Absolutely. In your travels, for this book and other stuff you've done, what seems to be the most prominent type of paranormal activity that happens, or is it kind of like even for everything?
Boy, it runs the gamut. It really does. I know that anytime I'm talking to somebody contacts me about an experience, I've learned that I will never know what to expect. Sometimes, I'm talking to somebody and they can't wait to talk to me, like they've initiated an email or something. And
right.
So we set up a time to call, but they're really pushing for like within the hour as opposed to a day or two, And I'm very much a day or two kind of guy, because, I have things going on. I live a life. And, but when they're really pushing for it, I'm like, okay, I need to make an exception and try to talk to this person quickly. And sometimes they just saw a light in the sky, and it's not a big deal to me, but it's definitely a big deal to them. So even in that moment, I need to check myself and be like, this person still needs your respect and time and kindness and non-judgmental ear. Even though it was just a light, it was very, very impactful to them, And these types of encounters, whether it's just a light in the sky or a full-on abduction or, a really scary haunting experience, it's very traumatic for people. And I have my own struggles with mental health, in regards to anxiety, depression, sometimes suicidal ideation, and I go through it, And my catalyst isn't extraterrestrials or the paranormal, but theirs is. But we can connect on the symptoms, the depression, the anxiety, the suicidal ideation. We can connect on that, even though we don't have the same catalyst. And I think that also helps in that bond or in that discussion with them so they can open up more, But yeah, I guess to answer your question though, it runs the gamut.
Okay. Now, in your own personal stuff, obviously you've seen a couple things. Do you think you've been abducted?
I don't think so. It was really strange with that thing happening at 4 years old, and I can't really remember what happened other than waking up the next morning. So that leads me to believe that maybe something more happened, but also 4 years old and you can fall asleep at the drop of a hat, So,
Right.
I chalk it up to that. But yeah, I don't feel as though I've been abducted. And I've talked to a lot of people who do feel like they've been abducted, and I'm not recognizing a lot of those things in my own encounters, But yeah, I've seen some strange stuff. And just before COVID hit, I saw this weird cryptid thing on the side of the road. And I don't have very many personal cryptid encounters. Right. I think there's just two. And this one was the most recent, if you'd like to hear that.
Absolutely. Yes.
Sure. So it was February of 2020. The world was about to go to hell, but it hadn't yet, And we were just hearing bits and pieces globally of this thing called COVID. And I was driving home, and it was like 6:45 in the evening, so not late. But in Maine in February at 6:45 p.m., might as well be midnight. That's how dark it is, So I'm driving, and I live in a rural area. And I was driving the back road, so there's literally nobody else on the road. And up ahead, about 300 yards, I can see this tall, lanky thing on the side of the road. And in my area, there's ditches on each side of the road, and it helps with water drainage when it rains and snows and stuff. And I can see this thing standing on the side of the road, and it's probably 6 feet tall, really skinny, lanky, and I see it take an exaggerated step, like over the ditch, and then walk into the woods. And what my headlights captured, it looked like it was some sort of stick man. There were the legs and limbs and arms, and even the torso and head seemed to be like intertwined sticks. almost like the Blair Witch dolls, if you will, but 6 feet tall and really skinny. And its head had two things going straight up, not like antlers, but like two sticks sticking straight up. And it kind of reminded me of Groot, from Guardians of the Galaxy, if people are familiar. And so I'm traveling on the road and I'm going like 45 miles an hour. So I come upon the spot of where it walked into the woods really quickly. Nobody's on the road. So I decide to stop. And I stop in the middle of the road and I roll down my window to see if I can hear this thing crunching on the snow walking in the woods. And I don't hear anything, but my car starts to be filled with this awful smell. And it's, like sulfur or rotting eggs or something, and in some Bigfoot encounters, there's that really bad smell people talk about. And like some black-eyed kid encounters and with demons, people talk of a really rancid smell. This is the first time I've ever experienced it. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. And for the rest of the ride home, because since I didn't hear anything, I wasn't about to I couldn't just park my car and go walk in the woods, leave my car in the middle of the road. But for the rest of my ride home, I had to have all 4 windows down because it stunk so bad. And I just never experienced anything like that. So the next day, and it's daylight, I go back to, again, where I think this thing walked into the woods. And I was able to pull my car into a driveway that was kind of close to where this area was. And I looked around. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. I didn't see any weird footprints in the snow or anything. So I don't know what the hell I saw. But again, so it looked like this weird stick figure, skinny thing like Groot, but it was pitch black and it was shiny black. Like when my lights shined on it, it almost looked like it was oil, or like those black beetles, how dark and shiny they are. It was that dark. It was really weird. So I did a little bit of research. You don't think to do research in your own 5-mile, 10-mile vicinity of your house, or at least I don't.
Right.
And so I did some research, and it turns out in the 90s, there was a UFO sighting, again, just a mile from this area. And that was people reported this light coming on in their yard, and they didn't have lights on the side of their house. They didn't have motion lights, but they saw that at night, and this was a similar time frame, 7-8 o'clock at night, their yard was lit up, and they're like, what the hell is this? So they all go outside and they look up, and there was this massive UFO hovering above the house, and it was shining a light down. And they didn't report that anything strange other than seeing this massive UFO above their house, happen. They were outside, they looked at it, they saw it, and almost like the UFO was like, oh crap, you saw me. It took off, But I thought that was interesting that happened within a mile of this area.
It's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Do people come to you with stories, or do you have to search stories out, or how's that work?
It's both. When I first started out, a couple decades ago, it was definitely me reaching out all the time and, researching newspapers and being in the library and finding any book I could and blah, blah, blah. But nowadays, people are reaching out a lot more, and that's great. And again, some of it is more mundane for me, but some of it is really intricate and involved. And, those can be fun, but they're also really hard. And sometimes, I don't know how much I want to be involved, as it goes, because it's great to get the story. But sometimes it feels like my involvement, they almost want my involvement to be a little bit more personal, And that can happen where I do become friendly with some of these people, but I can't say become friends with all of them, but I respect the hell out of a lot of them, and I want to have a positive impact in their life, but I can't give 100% to every little story, especially if I'm back to back, and sometimes there's something that's more pressing, or somebody's being hurt, or somebody's incredibly scared, or someone's on the verge of hurting themselves, or something, and something needs more attention than something else. But But yeah, it's a good mix of both. Like I'm still in my research finding stories that in my opinion I should have found 10 or 15 years ago, but I'm just finding them now.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of keeps fueling the fire. Like, oh my God, I just found this. Like, what the hell else haven't I found yet? It makes you keep wanting to go.
For the first few years that I was ghost hunting, when we made the change, because we did a lot of commercial jobs, just
Yeah.
going to hotels and stuff, and then we started getting to the residentials, and you got to be real careful with residentials because you're dealing with people's lives.
Yeah.
And so the first few years I was doing residentials, I had myself available 24 hours to clients.
That's a
Because
lot.
I understood. Yeah, I understood. That they were afraid. And so I wanted to help them through it. It was
Of
I grew
course.
up in an active house. But I realized, and I know people used to take me aside on my team and go, "Look, you can't do this." And I kept doing it and doing it. Finally, about I would say 4 years into the residentials, it finally hit me. It was like the V8 moment. And I thought, I can't do this. It's a drain of energy. I can't have them calling me 24 hours a day. I
Yeah.
know they're scared. I can give them the help I can, but it's just physically impossible to do that. And I
Right.
think that it's similar with your story, where you just have to draw that line.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I don't always want to, but I feel like I was very similar to you just starting out with the paranormal team and doing, I was also researching my own stuff of interest, the UFOs and cryptids and things. And I feel like we were making ourselves available to people. Not that they always acted on it, but it just felt like you had to do that, and then once it does start to pick up and you're contacted too much, you're like, okay, it's okay to have boundaries and still help people. So
Yeah, yeah. I had to learn
yeah,
that. I mean, that was a big lesson because they were
yeah,
calling me 24 hours a day, blowing up
that's
my
tough.
phone with email, and photos and all this other stuff. And it's
Yeah,
like, okay, I'm good. I'm working on your stuff. Just just normal hours.
yeah, yeah,
To
yeah.
do that stuff.
Right.
So what's next for you?
Just keep plugging away. I'm always working on something. So, two favorite things of mine is storytelling and writing. So I always have a new book that I'm working on. I'm working on a new book now, and I'm also always working on different projects. I really enjoy working with audio. I also enjoy working with video. And so I have my own podcast. It's a storytelling podcast. And, I like to share strange stories. And it's not just stuff from Maine, it's stuff from all over. I do definitely pepper some Maine stuff in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's called I Want to Believe, the podcast. And, because I don't believe everything, but I want to. I want the Fresno Nightcrawler to be real, And I also started this thing called Slevik Stories, and it's on YouTube and TikTok, and it's just like 1 minute shorts, getting through, an experience really quick. But I just I love collecting strange stories, and I love them so much that I want to share them with people. I'm like, you need to know about this. This is weird. And I'm like, how are you not fascinated with this? But it's okay. Not everybody is. But I love it so much that my girlfriend and I like to make these shorts. And we also, in our own downtime, when we're just hanging out with each other, we have a Novelist 5 and a spirit box and stuff. And so we'll go to areas where there's been anomalous activity reported, and just see if we can pick up anything. And sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But yeah.
That's great. That's terrific. Yeah, I'm a lot like you in a lot of that. I love the history part of it. I love doing the research.
For sure.
Especially on an old hotel or someplace that
Yeah.
we go into. Especially like when you go in there and look at the architecture in some of these places. It's
Oh,
fantastic.
yeah.
But yeah. So I have one more question, and I usually ask this to everybody, and it's kind of an out there question. But
Okay.
let's pretend that we are on the strip at Las Vegas, and there's some other guys like you that are out there. How do you get people to come in to listen to your stories?
Wow. That's a good question. I'm only my knee-jerk reaction was I don't care. Like you can come in or not. Like I'm still gonna tell them regardless.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I guess really to break it down though, because I do care, because I do want to spread the word, so I do
Right.
actually care. So I think it's just about explaining that I have some really strange stories I want to tell. Would you like to hear some? you know, and hopefully they say yes. But yeah, that's a really great question, and I don't think I have a good answer. But knee jerk was I don't care, and the when I think about it answer is like please come in and listen to some stories. I promise they'll be good, and I promise that they're strange, and I think you'll go home tonight thinking about some of them. You know.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing with us. I really appreciate
Yeah.
it. Fantastic. The hour went by really fast. Would love to have you on
Yeah.
again to chit chat. That was
Absolutely.
fun.
Yeah,
All
this
right,
was fun, Charlotte. Thank you.
how can people find you?
My name's pretty unique, Nomar Slevik. So if you give that a search in Google, you'll pretty much find all my stuff. My books are available really wherever you get books, but obviously Amazon. If you have Amazon Prime, you'll get the free shipping on it. But I also have them available on my own online store. And if you get it from me, I'll sign it, throw a sticker and a bookmark in there. And that's slevikstore.company.site. And if you can't remember that, that's okay. Just Google my name, Nomar Slevik, and UFOs, and a bunch of stuff's going to come up. So.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much again. Have a great rest of your evening.
You too. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Bye. Okay, that was great. I learned a lot about Maine, because like I said in the beginning, my big thing about Maine is Stephen King novels. That's it. I know it snows, and it's pretty. It snows by the ocean. All right, tomorrow I'll be back live, 6:30 p.m. Pacific. It is Casual Friday with medium Nancy Matz, and she has decided that she wants to continue her talk about what's lying for you in the dark in the night. So we're going to continue that conversation tomorrow. So it should be a fun night. 6:30 p.m. Pacific, usual time. I'll be right back here. If you like the show, share it with 5 people. If you hated the show, share it with 5 of your enemies. We're always equal opportunity here. And we're just trying to get the word out about our little show. Listening right now and you like what you heard, saw and heard, please hit that follow button or hit that subscribe button, depending on where you're at. I'd really appreciate it. All right, guys, I'm out of here, and I will see you tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. Have a great evening, everybody.